And now we're going to get into the Razzies of our Game of the Year discussion. These are the worst games we played this year. This isn't necessarily disappointing, because for me, disappointing and worse are two different categories.
I could go with that. I totally agree with that.
Sometimes they're the same, but disappointing for me is more like it's not necessarily a bad game. It just didn't live up to your expectations. Whereas worst game or bad game is a game that's actually just really bad, despite whatever your expectations were going in. And I'm going to kick it off with Days Gone. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because there's a 2-hour podcast you can listen to of us talking about how we didn't like that game.
So we had to abandon because we could have gone on longer.
Oh, yeah. We had to end up stopping that one a little bit early.
Yeah.
So I'm going to save my breath a little bit here and just say that for a big, release from a major publisher this year, a platform holder, this is a pretty disappointing game. It's just kind of it's very the open world for me was not very interesting. The characters were not very interesting. The story was not only well-worn territory, but also not even really executed very well. Like there was nothing unique about the story that they were telling. It was just another zombie story. This isn't really a disappointment because I didn't really have super high expectations for it, but in some ways I think even those low expectations weren't met. So like I said, you can listen to us talk about this game for 2 hours on another podcast. This came out earlier this year, so you have to go back a little ways. But it's the Days Gone video that's 2 hours long on the YouTube channel, so you should be able to find it.
Yep.
It was just a bit mediocre and lazy. It wasn't the worst. It was just like outdated and a bit lazy.
They could have taken away two things, and it would have completely changed the game for me. I feel
like Boozer,
and take away the gas, and the game might have hit my top because I enjoyed what I played.
Hit your top.
Outside, yeah.
We'll have to talk about this later.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have a 2-hour podcast about
if you take out
what happened
and Boozer, I would be fine with the game.
I can't work under these conditions. I'm serious.
What's
going on?
Definitely could be improved. But I was just actually thinking about this when I saw it on the list, and I was like, if they changed these two different things, I probably would have felt way different about the game.
Yeah.
As far as me personally, to each person, what they want out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was pretty much. It was pretty much when I was standing out in the middle of nowhere, then all of a sudden, 500 zombies just randomly spawned in, literally right on top of me. That was kind of where I was like, well, this probably isn't for me. But yeah, that's that. Let's move on to Left Alive. Which there's also evidence of how amazing this game is on various channels across the Voxel Voice network. Derek, why don't you tell me exactly what you love about Left Alive?
Insert crickets chirping. The fact, I guess the publisher. That's all I love about it. And actually, the whole idea behind it was with this war that's going on, you have 3 different angles of it you were supposed to be seeing. It was supposed to be kind of this stealth kind of Metal Gear-y type game, and just nothing worked.
Mm-hmm. Like literally nothing worked.
Literally nothing. Nothing worked. Like, I died we spent a good hour streaming it, and I spent a good 50 minutes of that hour just
Dying over and over again.
because nothing worked right.
Yeah. No, it seemed like a complete disaster of a game, in every respect.
Yeah, I was just like, I was so excited for it too, because like seeing the videos on it and like what it was supposed to be out and these takes, and like it seemed relatively interesting, and then just not being able to play it at all because it was that bad was highly disappointing. Especially coming from Square, because usually games like this are pretty good, I mean, and at least playable. So
they nailed it with the Quiet Man. So why did you expect them to anything less than perfection? It had kind of like a little bit of a Metal Gear vibe to it, so I was kind of interested in it too a little bit. And after seeing Derek do his thing with it, I was like, I'm glad I didn't drop a whole lot of money on this one.
Yeah.
Oh well. Sometimes games are just bad.
Like so bad that I haven't even gone back into it, because usually I'll wait like a couple months, see if there's been patches and stuff, and nope, I haven't even tried to boot it back up yet.
I don't think they fixed it. All right,
Fuck
Lee.
that game.
Huh?
Fuck that game.
Yeah, that's what Derek just said.
At least this isn't just me saying it too. Like, Lee has had the same experience.
Yeah.
Fundamentally broken, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
I just want to say something right here that Left Alive is way, way, way worse than Days Gone.
Yeah.
Just because these two games are on the same worst list. I just happened to not play too many really bad games this year. So when I was trying to come up with like what's my worst game, I'm realizing that I'm better with my money, I guess, than all of you are. And I'm not buying
content.
These atrocious games.
Days Gone was mediocre. Left Alive is fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
They're completely different levels of
bad.
Yeah.
Of not great.
Left Alive is the worst of the bad.
So, speaking of this sliding scale of bad, which one do you want to talk about first, Lee? Generation Zero or Zombieland?
Generation Zero. Right. What a bare bones empty mess that was. That was an insult to put that burned up store shelves. That did. It gives the appearance of being kind of early access. There was literally there was no content there when it was released. Like, kind of as there was nothing to tell you that it wasn't a full release. And it's kind of there was literally nothing in that when I played that. And now I understand they've added a lot in there, but for a hell of a lot of money. So even now, if you pick up the base and you kind of, I don't want to pay money into that. There's nothing for you there. It's literally just you walk and there's nothing.
So you have to pay for the updates?
Waste of money. Yes.
What did they add?
Story.
Okay. But they didn't patch it in as a...
No, they didn't. No.
So like, hey, this game's bad. Here's DLC for it. But hey, this DLC is what should have been there to begin with.
I mean, they've added a hell of a lot of content to it, but there's a reason why you haven't heard about it. Because it's not,
because it sucks.
There's no, because you do get kind of pockets of people that are talking about it. It's just like, this is vastly improved from the original version, but so few people are talking about that because they're not going to pay for something that there was kind of gypped for in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, it was a bit of a slap in the face. Worse not because of anything it does particularly badly. It's just like, especially from someone like Avalanche. It's
Mhm.
kind of what were you thinking? You know,
Right.
this should have been an early access game. You can't be releasing this as a physical product.
Yeah.
Because if it's like that, then it's kind of you can't. Yeah, it's the same argument. The thing there was more to No Man's Sky, a lot more to No Man's Sky initially than there was for this. But that's kind of
Yeah, and
where
then
that grew
and then they
exponentially.
put out a ton of free stuff for it.
For free. Yeah,
It's like a
what
completely
redemption
different
story
game
that
now.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a vastly improved game. But it's kind of even at the base of that, how angry people were with that is nothing compared to what this was to start off with.
Yeah.
Bad.
I'm glad. I think Ryan talked me out of buying that one. I forget what
Yeah.
the reason was.
Because it was bad.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was even before it came out. Like I was like
Well, I
on
knew
the
it was
fence
gonna be
about if
bad.
I could get it.
Yeah.
I had a feeling it was gonna be bad.
Mm.
I was gonna be like, why don't you wait on
Yeah,
that
I'm
one?
pretty
See
sure
how
that
it
was.
see how it pans out.
Yeah.
Didn't tell me that, though, did you?
Didn't.
It would have been in the same chat there, Lee.
I think Lee already
I
had it
missed
like
it.
pre-ordered
Oh.
or something. So that's why you're like, you should probably just wait and see how it was. 'Cause I
Yeah.
think there was a lot that came out around that time too.
Holy fuck, that was bad.
Yeah. How was Zombieland?
I don't know if I mentioned before, but Zombieland was shit.
Yeah, you mentioned that before. I think.
Yeah, one of the worst kind of examples of lazy license game.
Yeah.
This was a kind of a mobile level game, free mobile level game at a $40 price tag that was on shelves.
Mhm.
This was a really bad game. Lazy assets. A twin stick shooter where a direct hit only hits 50% of the time. I didn't even mention that.
No.
One of the things you want when you're playing a twin stick shooter is for the kind of the hitboxes to work, and it only works 50-50.
Yeah, I mean that's kind
So
of
when you're
like
having direct-
the whole thing.
yeah.
Twin stick
I
shooters
forgot about
is for the
Yeah.
shooting to work. This was the one with the real pictures of the characters, right?
Yeah, with the
okay.
lazy clipping. Yeah,
Yeah, you had
Yeah.
your Jesse Eisenberg and Woody Harrelson
Woody
picture.
Harrelson, yeah. But then you watch the in-game graphics of them; they look like
and it wasn't their
zombie
voices,
NPCs
right?
from Fallout. No, Abigail Breslin was there, but then again, she turned up for the opening of an envelope, I think.
No.
But this was a shocking game.
Yeah.
There have been better movie games this year, put it that way. Terminator being one. Not a perfect game, but a lot better than this.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is not what people take from movie-based games.
Yeah, I didn't even know this one was happening until you brought it up and told me how bad it was.
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to do for the cast. I had no idea how much I was going to hate it. Oh, good lord.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I don't know. I can't think of any quote from Zombieland.
Sometimes you just got to take one for the boys. You
Yeah,
really
I guess
do.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was our year of the Razzies, our the worst games that we all played this year. Like I said, sliding scale. Your games were much worse than mine. There's no doubt about that. I just didn't happen to play any extremely awful broken games, which is usually not the case because I'm usually playing a bunch of like mobile port indie game shovelware stuff that gets brought my way, but I've kind of gotten sick of that, so I don't play them as much as I used to.
I will say it's been a good year for bad, in the respect that kind of there's been previous years been lots more contenders for like, oh, that was atrocious.
Yeah.
I don't think there's been quite so many this time.
Yeah, I mean the last one I played was Quiet Man, so
It's enough for a lifetime.
Yeah, twice.
Mm.
Yeah, it's been overall. I felt it was like a very middle of the road year. There wasn't anything that was like, oh my god, this is epic and will live on forever. But there was also nothing that was like you said, so bad that like a lot that was so bad that it dragged the year down. It was kind of like a like I said, middle of the road year. That despite that, I think some games that maybe wouldn't have stood out as much stood out more because of it. Like in another year, maybe like a Plague Tale maybe wouldn't have had a big of a hit impact as it did. Or like if Control was going up against God of War, maybe Control wouldn't have hit as hard for me as it did. So, it's okay to have a year without a whole bunch of huge blockbusters and let some of the games breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's going to wrap us up for 2019 specifically. Now what we're going to do is talk about the year, the decade as a whole. And what I tasked you guys with was coming up with a personal favorite game of the decade and a game that you think maybe it wasn't your most favorite game, but had a substantial impact on the decade or games as a whole. So, Derek, I'm going to let you start with yours. You had World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV. Now, one of those did not come out in this decade. So, which one is which?
So I think World of Warcraft did not come out in the decade. But the reason I put it there was for the impact it has had on gaming.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the systems we see, prior to like World of Warcraft coming out, like a lot of our loot systems were highly stat based, but like there was no like loot system. There was no like not loot system, but like rarity. There was no definitive like rarity system.
Mm-hmm.
And then World of Warcraft kind of came onto the scene and implemented this, and now you see that in every single game that has loot follows the standard. You know, white to purple, then your legendaries are like orange or like a yellow or something like that. They kind of standardize this, and you see this in every single game. So to me, that kind of like would stand out because of that, because that's like what I play is a lot of looters and stuff like that, and that's just a common thing you see now. Any looter you pick up, you know what rarity of something you're getting if you've never played it before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the reason I chose that one.
Yeah, and I think over the past decade, loot has become a major part of a lot of different kinds of games.
Yeah, it's become more like of a commonplace.
Like we just talked about Borderlands 3, where, you know, when the first Borderlands came out, that was at the beginning of the decade. And we also have, you know, like Destiny and The Division and all of these other loot shooters that are, you know, taking those cues from, you know, World of Warcraft and even before that, like Diablo and stuff like that, and incorporating them into different genres. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty good, and I think WoW as a just a over its entire lifespan has had a profound impact on gaming as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Especially like, and even to add it into the whole decade thing, like they just released WoW Classic, which was bringing it back to what it was when it originally came out, up to a certain time period. Like without any of the updates, it was pure vanilla. And it
Hmm.
brought back a huge amount of fan base. There's been no other game to do that. To be, hey,
Yeah.
here's our vanilla experience of a game. And so many people come back to it, at least in the MMO world.
Hmm.
Um, that was just unheard of. They took a chance on it, and it's been highly successful so far. Like
Yeah.
even I went back to play that.
Yeah. No, that's it's still a game that people talk about today, and it's how when did it come out? Like 2004 or something like that.
Yeah, November
Yeah.
23rd, 2004.
Yeah, 16 years now. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
going on 16 years ago, and it's
Um,
still highly relevant.
yeah. So, why is Final Fantasy 14 on this list?
Final Fantasy 14 is on this list for kind of a different reason. When Final Fantasy 14 released, it's another MMO, um, but it was garbage. It kind of goes along with like our worst. This game, when it released, was hot garbage. It wasn't fun. No one liked it. The fan base was pissed, especially coming off from the previous one, which was actually pretty decent. So what Square did was they scrapped the game. They shut down servers, and they went back to the drawing board with the core of the game, reshaped it, reformulated it, and then re-released it as A Realm Reborn. Everybody who had an account with the game when it originally came out got upgraded to this version of the game. And now when this version of the game came out, um, it was a complete 360 from what the game was. It was fun. There was a new life. There was new mechanics. The quest line was interesting. The storyline was interesting. And now, after so many years, it has grown into one of the most popular MMOs out there right now, alongside of like World of Warcraft. It's still being updated. They're still adding content to it, and I think it could even become as relevant as World of Warcraft, due to the different things they're doing with it, with the huge DLCs, the stories, to changing, to keeping that Final Fantasy element with it. But I wanted it on this list because it shows that you can have a game to tank, and it's all right to go back to that drawing board and try to fix it if you have that dedication behind it, and it can work out. And I'm hoping maybe we see that with Anthem. They're planning on going back to the drawing board and um, kind of re-releasing how the game is. So we'll see if
Hmm.
they're able to be that successful as Final Fantasy 14 was by re-releasing it
Yeah,
and taking that chance. So it was just kind of one of those things that stuck out to me. It was like, because that's something else you haven't heard of. Usually, if a game tanks, it disappears and goes away.
yeah. Um,
Especially in that MMO world too. There's hundreds of them out there. Some are successful, some aren't, but usually they just disappear. They wanted to be, so they just scrapped it, went back to that drawing board, and now it's a highly relevant game.
hmm. Yeah, I'd say that you could say that this is the decade for redemption stories, games that have turned themselves around. Um,
Yeah.
like you said, I mean, Final Fantasy 14 is obviously probably the biggest example, but you can see that with like Destiny. That's
Hmm.
kind of had its ups and downs, and has always managed to pull through. And we talked about No Man's Sky earlier. That the reception of that
Yeah,
game
that was it.
was not great at the beginning, and it's completely turned itself around. So yeah, that's a pretty good. It kind of falls into this category of like, games aren't necessarily what they ship as anymore. You can ship a game, and it can be one thing, and then by the time you're done updating or fixing or whatever you're doing to it, it can be something completely different. Um, And that's kind of like a double-edged sword there, where on one hand it's good that games can have continued lives, and once it's out there, it's not completely over. On the other hand, it can mean that something that's not done gets pushed out the door in hopes that maybe we'll fix it down the road. So I think over time, and I've seen it just over this past decade, we are tending to lean more toward the more responsible way to use that kind of technology, but there's always going to be the times where we get burned because something gets pushed out too soon.
Right.
And yeah.
Just to squeeze it in while we're kind of talking about this part, it's even starting to stretch outside of just video games. A recent story I just read about, just because it was a movie my parents went to see, so it's going to pop up in Facebook because you've talked about it. That movie, the rendition of Cats that just came out, they patched the movie after it came out in theater to enhance the graphics because people were upset with how it looked.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time I've ever heard of a movie getting a visual patch while still in theater.
Oh yeah.
So it was just to coincide with like the updating and patching, which is now like a thing now, and now it's starting to stretch even outward.
Yeah. That's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that, but
it was just like, it was a crazy story to read because they had just went to see it and they really enjoyed it. So then all of a sudden the story popped up saying how bad it was and that it's been patched to look better.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just it was weird because of being in the game industry and doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess that's kind of while we were talking about, while we're kind of on the topic of Star Wars, you could see how that can be a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Going back and retouching some things and maybe not making the best decisions around that. But yeah, like I said, I think a lot of times, at first it may seem weird or be misused, but over time, a lot of these kinds of things kind of suss themselves out, and it ends up being more better than bad. And yeah, we'll see what happens with Anthem. I still think that there's some things good about that game. Like, I enjoyed the flying around and the shooting, and I think it's a beautiful game. Everything else about it, I think, needs to be redone. So,
and they've actually now, with whatever little update they just put out on that, I had seen an article where some people are starting to come back to it, and like some Reddit posts are talking about like people actually completing builds and doing stuff in it. So it'll just be another interesting one to see if they can really pull off bringing it to that reception that they wanted from it and that we thought we were going to get from it.
All right, cool. So those are your most impactful games of the decade. So now we'll move on to mine, which I'm going to start with the game that I think impacted the decade the most, which is Minecraft. Technically, Minecraft came out in 2009, but like its official like 1.0 version didn't come out until 2010. And I think as a force in the video game industry is kind of undeniable. Basically the most popular game ever made. And specifically why I put it on this list is more of its influence in other games, not necessarily its popularity, because while I played it and I enjoy it, I don't play it currently, and I don't really engage with the current community aspect of it and stuff like that. I think it's great that there's communities built around it and they're thriving and it's constantly growing and everything like that. And I think Microsoft's acquisition of it was a smart move for both them and the game itself, because it's allowed them to just continually support the game, kind of probably forever. But elements that came from Minecraft are kind of that are in games today are kind of like, there's too many to count. Almost most games nowadays have some sort of crafting system. Even the most basic element of Minecraft. You're collecting things and then you're combining things in order to make something new. Some of them are just like really basic, like Far Cry, but some of them, like, Dragon Quest Builders too. Without Minecraft, Dragon Quest Builders wouldn't have existed.
Yep.
The survival aspects, where Minecraft didn't have a whole lot of like what we would consider survival, like hardcore survival by today's standards, they were still there. Like, you would starve after a while. Your hearts would go down and you'd have to eat. And those have made their way into tons of games. There's entire genres built out of Minecraft in terms of both crafting and surviving. And it also pioneered the idea of early access, which has kind of taken huge steps forward this decade, probably in the last 5 or 6 years specifically. When Minecraft first came out, it was you paid Mojang directly, and you got a beta version of that game, knowing that it was a beta version and that it would be updated over time. It wasn't like officially called early access. It wasn't like game preview like Xbox has, or like titled early access like Steam has. It wasn't anything official like that, but it was that business model where you knew you were paying to be a beta tester. And because of that, that's why that game ended up being so accessible to all of the people that played it, because they were able to provide that feedback. They were able to make the game that the community wanted, as well as the game that the developers wanted. And that's how early access goes today, where you pay early for a game, it's not going to be incomplete. I just talked about it with Satisfactory, and I know that game's going to be updated and supported for a long time. And Minecraft kind of started that business model. And the list can go on from there, but those were the major things that specifically impacted the games that I play, that were impacted by Minecraft. Fuck the guy that made the game. He can go eat a dick.
What?
But
what did I miss?
The guy that made Minecraft, Notch. Yeah, he's an asshole. He's a huge dickhead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like huge, like fuck poor people and shit like that. So he can go. He sold it to Microsoft. Huh? Yeah, literally. Yeah. He's made enough money that he can literally buy poor people and fuck them. He probably does. I don't know.
Christ. It sounds like character assassination.
Welcome to a whole new side of Ryan.
But he sold the game to Microsoft, and Microsoft's done a much better job with it than he probably would be doing right now. So that's Minecraft. My personal game of the decade, the game that had the most impact on me, was Breath of the Wild. And I mean, I can make connections to Minecraft from Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild wouldn't exist without Minecraft. with the crafting and stuff like that, but even like the idea of kind of throwing you into a world and kind of expecting you to come up with your own adventure in a lot of ways. Like, Breath of the Wild had quests and stuff, but a lot of it was just exploring and finding things on your own. And I think like that game had such a profound impact on the way that I look and expect games to be moving forward. It made me expect more from open world games. It made me expect more in the way that any game kind of looks at its world that it creates and crafts it to be something unique, instead of just like making a room in a video game and throwing a couple of chairs and a table in it and calling it a living room or a kitchen. Breath of the Wild takes the idea of like putting as much attention as you would to in a single room in a lot of games to an entire open world. And I'm excited to see what they do with the next one, like how they crank that up to the next level. And I'm also excited to see what the industry developers take from Breath of the Wild and start to incorporate it into their games. I feel like the first one we've really seen of this was Death Stranding. There's a lot of Breath of the Wild in Death Stranding. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other shit in Death Stranding as well that gets in the way. I mean, once you're in that open world and you're doing your own thing, there's so much Breath of the Wild in that game. And that gets me excited to see what not only Nintendo does with the next iteration of it, but how other developers start incorporating elements of it into their games. Like I want Far Cry, the next Far Cry, to be Breath of the Wild with guns. I guess is what I'm saying. Like, just throw me into a giant open world jungle or whatever setting you want to set your Far Cry game and put some of the story structure that Far Cry is known for, but do so much more with the emergent gameplay of those games. Because at this point, Far Cry 5 especially, it just felt way too scripted. It felt like I could literally see the systems at work. Like it just doesn't work anymore because it just doesn't feel fluid. It doesn't feel like I'm actually in a natural world. It feels like I'm in a simulation, and and it just isn't working for me anymore.
If you're only really going to have like half an hour of story, roughly, in a Far Cry game, lean into that. Make it more open. Don't give you the busy work. Just have at it, and then get to it when you want to.
Yeah, and they kind of went down that road with Far Cry 2, but that they did it way ahead of time. Like, we weren't ready for Far Cry 2. Let's put it that way.
And we'll never be ready for malaria.
No one will ever be ready for malaria. Yeah, but I mean, even when you think about malaria, like when you think about malaria in Far Cry 2, right? That was something that just randomly happened, and you had to completely change the way you approached whatever you were doing at that moment, right?
Yeah.
When you look at Breath of the Wild, when a thunderstorm rolls through, it's random, and all of a sudden, any sort of piece of metal you have on you, it could kill you because you could get struck by lightning. Or you're climbing up a cliff, and this is more annoying than it, but this probably is more comparable to malaria than the lightning. But you're climbing up a cliff, and all of a sudden it starts to rain, and then all of a sudden you can't climb up that cliff no more. You have to change your entire, like, your view of the world and how you're approaching it. And it's a game system. It feels random. It doesn't feel like it's scripted. It doesn't feel like, you accidentally trip an alarm at a outpost that's sitting in the middle of this forest, and then all of a sudden like 50 guys on ATVs start rolling up and they never stop coming. Like, that doesn't feel natural. It feels forced. It feels super scripted. And I want the randomness. I want to feel like I want to be able to tell the story. I want to be able to actually, like what they've been saying for like open world games are going to be for forever, right? Like you're going to be able to tell your stories to your friends and stuff like that. And it's like, well, actually everybody ends up having the same story because it's all quest based, and they end up meeting the same characters and stuff like that. So, those are my 2 games of the decade: Minecraft and Breath of the Wild. Both kind of related, but also both very different. And Lee, you have Batman Arkham City and Amnesia Dark Descent, right? That's the name of the game, the full name?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So what one do you want to start with?
I'll start with my own personal choice.
Okay.
Which would probably be Arkham City. Now, it's arguable to... It's a good argument to have that say maybe it's not as good as Arkham Asylum. But that's 2009, so it doesn't matter. As its own thing... I really enjoyed that. It's really stuck out to me. Being a big graphic novel comic book fan, it's the ultimate fan service game. It implements this open world. Well, maybe it doesn't tell the Batman story as fully as maybe the Telltale games, which is probably the best Batman storytelling because you get both sides. But as a fan fiction sim, you can't get much better than that. The way they implement the open world, its tone, because there's still not really another game in this genre that nails its tone as well. Spider-Man maybe expanded upon that and did more things with it, but that's more of a light tone with occasional pathos.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of has that solid urban gothic thing you want from a Batman game. It's probably aged now, but back then the combat was super satisfying. It's played out now. You can't keep playing that card so many times.
Yeah.
But then it was super fun, and it was simplified. When they tried to add more things, the more sequels went on, the more ludicrous it got. The more you tune out of it. Once you start shooting across levels, but it was that it's that perfect storm of just getting the right amount of that sort of thing in, expanding enough from Asylum, opening it up, doing the same but different thing, making it from Metroidvania to open world, semi-open world, nailing the verticality of an open world as well, which you had before with stuff like Infamous. And what's that horrible Infamous knockoff? Prototype and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of doing more with that as opposed to just climbing to the top and jumping off, killing people. Kind of added more to the more texture to the city. So I think good story.
I think it did a good. Arkham City is specific. So Arkham Asylum was very much a Metroidvania. It was a small scale. Arkham City did a good job of kind of giving you a confined sandbox, but still putting those Metroidvania elements into it. And then we saw it kind of in the Rise of the Tomb Raider done really well, and some other games too that I can't think of right now. Yeah, just kind of like these more confined. Like they're not huge open world areas. They're more confined, but they have a lot of secrets and a lot of. You kind of get intimately acquainted with them over time.
Yeah. It does that good thing of, like you say, giving you some semblance of open world, but sectioning it off in that kind of Escape from New York. Let's wall it off a little bit, and then break that wall down piece by piece, so you end up gaining more of Gotham over time. But that's a trick you can only play once. Once you've done that in the first game, it loses its, and then you can see it's a wall they're breaking off for a certain part of the game. But first time you do it, it's like this is strong way of doing this.
Yeah, like that, like how they did it with Grand Theft Auto 3 in that first one, but then they couldn't, like in the games after that where they did that, it felt cheesy. It felt like a cop out to just artificially block you off from accessing the whole area.
Once you know the themes, you played your hand. Yeah. That one stands out for me. Acting wise, voice cast wise, production value wise, it just really worked for me. So that's my top one of the last 10 years, personally.
And Amnesia is your most impactful.
It wasn't gonna be.
No.
I was going to say Dark Souls.
Oh, that would have been a
how
good
that's
one.
expanded. It would, but Demon Souls fucks that up. That was 2009.
Yeah, but Dark Souls is the one that everybody cares about.
That doesn't count. I'd say I could have done Dark Souls. Look, now I've got to talk about Amnesia, which I don't really.
Well, maybe we'll just have Amnesia, and you can talk about Dark Souls.
Well, yeah, obviously.
I don't
Dark
care.
Souls,
Whatever you want. You can talk about both if you want. I don't care.
I'll quickly do Dark Souls.
Yeah. All right.
The extension of that and the way you can play with that, and you can add all sorts of different elements. You now got gunplay versions of that, and the expansion of it can implement itself into things you don't think it would, like Star Wars. It could absorb.
We just had a Star Wars game that's technically Dark Souls.
Yeah, it could absorb Tenchu and then turn Tenchu into a Souls type game. So kind of that really has spread out. It can be a one-trick pony sometimes. That's eventually going to lose its luster.
I think, in my opinion, the only one that's been able to not make it a one-trick pony has been From. A lot of the other, well, I guess you like the Surge too. But I feel like a lot of the other developers that try to make their own take on it, they only kind of come away with one good, and the rest of it kind of feels a little rote.
Well, the best thing probably would be to do is to follow more maybe Bloodborne, make it more of an aggressive game as opposed to a defensive game. Maybe that was more influential in a weird way, but obviously it has its source with Souls. Anyway, that's Dark Souls. Amnesia kind of is that thing where, if you want to break things down generationally, the kind of maybe the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation is a time where everything was really watered down into the kind of most marketable thing that you could get. It was like a Call of Duty, or it was like a Gears of War, or it was like this, or it was that grey aesthetic, or it was like Army of do you know what I mean? And horror games lost their flavour in that time. They tried to market itself as the most kind of action-based type thing. But Amnesia clocked in around 2010. I think that was the start of taking it back and then bringing kind of horror games back to its core. After trying to actionify them for about 10, 12 years. So they really worked on that, and you see how it's expanded out. It goes to Outlast. It goes to something like Layers of Fear, which has got nothing to do with anything like maybe a Resident Evil type thing or an Alone in the Dark type thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can do so many different things with it, or
And then it,
narrative type thing.
and then it even went to Resident Evil.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
people quote Outlast, but there's probably a lot more Amnesia in there. But yeah, it just allowed it to kind of get back down and gritty and psychological, and slamming it in that first person thing is probably the best thing you could have done for it. Maybe it needed to wait, so you could like have the technology to have that sort of
Mm-hmm.
kind of immersion with the lighting and improvements they've made with kind of binaural sound and stuff like that. That's
Oh, yeah.
helped. But
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
I think this is really kind of. I know you're not really kind of. You're not a massive horror game fan yourself,
No,
but
not
kind
really.
of the way they can take atmospherics and mechanics and
Yeah.
give you an atmosphere.
I
kind of-
definitely remember when Amnesia came out, and like the
Yeah.
response to it was pretty substantial. And
Yeah.
then seeing that kind of formula come up again, like you said with
Mm.
Outlast, and then eventually working its way up into the AAA with
Mm.
Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Almost coming around full circle.
Well, yeah. I mean, Resident Evil got to the point with Resident Evil 6 where it was just full cheese action.
Oh yeah.
And then it takes you to go to Resident Evil 7 and then refine that and then put that element of that into Resident Evil 2, which is now probably one of the best games in the series. Because it kind of takes more from 7 than it does from the original 2. So and now we've come back and now we're where we are now.
How do you feel it moving forward? Like, I know we've got more Resident Evil coming out, but like, do you see, like, what's the next, like, real, like, straight up Amnesia? Like, Last of Us 2, Outlast 2 didn't really hit as hard as I think it was. And then we had that Blair Witch game that came out this year that didn't really set the world on fire either. Do you think... Yeah.
They took with stuff like Outlast 2. What they took the wrong thing from it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't take the tension. They just took the grimness, and just up the grimness. And you can't do that. It's the immersiveness that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's place for both of them, of course, because you've got kind of whatever Mikami's doing with.
Ghostwire.
Ghostwire, and I can't think what his Tango game works. So there's that thing. So you still got your third person actually, Alone in the Dark's apparently coming back and going to be third person.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can still go forward. I think Capcom are still planning on kind of moving forward with that first person Amnesia style thing for the mainline series.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward, because they move in blocks of 3. First 3 were fixed perspective, second 3 were third person action games. This next block of 3 are going to be kind of first person immersive type thing. So we'll see where they go from there, because I think they're the ones that are nailing it on a big budget the most.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be surprised if kind of they don't try to resurrect in some form or other Silent Hills.
Yeah.
And then do it in the same sort of thing. Maybe not the same way as Kojima was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're probably going to ride off the back of that sometime. They just renewed the IP, I think. So they're probably going to ride off the back of that. But yeah, we'll see where that goes. Get away from the drawer opening thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Less notes. Make it more interactive on a sensible base. But yeah, I think, especially for kind of indie people moving forward, it's done a lot for the kind of the upper indie type developers.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. So those are our best / most impactful games of the decade. And now we are running very long here, so we're going to quickly shoot through our most anticipated games of next year. All 3 of us have Cyberpunk on that list, and yeah, I'm excited for Cyberpunk. Not so much based on what I've seen so far.
Mm.
More like the promise of what like
What
CD
it can be.
Projekt, yes, what CD Projekt can do with that setting and their ability to write interesting stories within that setting.
Mm.
I feel like what they've shown so far has been kind of like what you need to get like your I don't know, like your Call of Duty gamer interested in it, like
Mm.
showing some action set pieces with some cool flashy modern like futuristic tech and stuff like that, but not really getting into like the grittiness of cyberpunk and
Mm.
the like stories and like I mean they put Keanu Reeves in it, so you kind of know what they're going for in terms of like their marketing around the game anyway.
It depends. Are they going for Johnny Mnemonic or are they going for the Matrix?
Yeah, yeah.
You don't want to. You don't want a Johnny Mnemonic.
No. So I guess we'll hopefully they are keeping that for the game, like actually to be part of the game.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll show more of it coming up, like actually how a story sequence or a quest or whatever is in this game unfolds, as opposed to just kind of showing off these set pieces, or like scripted story sequences or something like that. But I'm still excited for it, and looking at what's been announced that could be coming out this year, that's probably my top one. Maybe
Yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima, now that got a release window. I know it's coming out next year because that does look very good, but this is the one that is a little bit more of a known quantity. Yeah, so what are your guys interested in terms of Cyberpunk? Like, what's doing it for you?
It just looks like a really well realised world. I just want to spend time. Already, I can tell by the way they walk around in it to be able to kind of explore this kind of Williams Gibson-esque kind of thing. I just want to move around in that, and then whatever happens after happens. I know you're going to have the combat. I've seen it. It looks solid, but I think we've been a long way from getting a kind of a definitive cyberpunk game.
Yeah.
You know, see, we get Deus Ex, but it always feels kind of compromised to some extent by its scope.
Yeah.
Anyway, that sort of game. So it'd be nice to kind of just get this full world, which you know they can do because they've done it twice now.
Yeah.
So you know they're going to be able to expand that and make it interesting.
Derek?
I love the whole cyberpunk aesthetic of it, but what's going to really capture me is the stories that they're going to tell, how they're going to tell them coming off from playing previous games and seeing what they've done with that. It's like, I'm so ready to see what they've done in this new type of setting. So I think that's like the big drawing point for me.
Yeah,
It's
just
going to
as
be
kind
the
of like
stories
like
told.
as a follow up from The Witcher 3, like how are
Yeah.
they going to expand their storytelling abilities?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see in this setting because those stories were some of the stories I played through in Witcher 3 were amazing. I was like, wow. So now in something that's like, I love the whole cyberpunk aesthetic. I love that kind of stuff.
Yep.
What are they going to give me in this where it's really, really going to hit home?
Yeah. Yeah, what really what was that? Sorry.
Is anybody clued in on the kind of the source material? Because I've not really dipped into cyberpunk. I'm not really an RPG table RPG person.
I was actually trying to find it at one point, but it's kind of expensive to get like the source books for it and stuff.
Yeah.
But apparently they're trying to home in on like the lore and all that's in the game and bring it into this like telling of the game. So
yeah, I mean, just kind of like how they adapted the Witcher books. They're gonna probably have stories that you can, well, obviously because they've already shown like Johnny Silverhand and stuff like that. But they're probably going to have their own take on it. You know, it's going to be
Yeah.
it's going to be their version of the stories of Cyberpunk, and not necessarily a word for word retelling of it.
Yeah,
Be respectful. Yeah.
Yeah,
which will be
respectful,
nice.
but yeah.
Because the Cyberpunk tabletop game, it's D&D-esque. Like, it's material for you to create these stories. So now where Witcher came from a book and they just end up doing an amazing job with it, this is something that's set up for them to create. This is set up for you to create stories and interactions and characters, and use this material. So now it's going to be implemented into a game to where they can home in on some of the set stories, but at the same time they have all the tools they need there to build on that and create custom new and other intriguing stories along with it. So it's just going to be really interesting to pan out because
Yeah. I won't have to wait too long because that's coming out pretty early in the year. And Derek, you also wanted to mention Final Fantasy VII.
yeah, I believe a lot of people have been waiting for a remake of Final Fantasy VII. But instead of just remaking the game, they're like, hey, we're going to take this a step further because there's been tons of games that have come out that's kind of like expanded on the lore, shown different parts of stories, different timelines, different events. And now they're taking as much as their original team as they can, and they're expanding the base story into, I think it's going to be 3 games once it's done. So they're taking this one game and they're going to blow it up into 3 40-plus hour games, to where they're taking, like, the first one's going to be based in a city, and it's all this other stuff that you might have just brushed by or have read about in lore or something like that, and they're going to expand on all of this instead of just doing a remake. So I think, like, as far as remakes and what people are looking for, this is going to be, if this works, this is the next bar. Like,
Yeah.
Resident Evil, bam, nailed it, said it, of what a remake should be. But I think as far as expanding it and doing something like what Final Fantasy wants to do, along with keeping that, if they're still able to keep that story intact, but expand it in the right way, and give you that lore and those extra bits you want, I think this is going to be that next step up on remakes and what they can do and what companies will be striving to achieve to do. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how it plays out and how it's received, because Final Fantasy is highly loved, but like also highly like, here's the lore, this is what's going on, this is the story.
Yeah.
Are you going to do that justice or not?
Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah, that's coming out kind of early next year too.
I believe so. I think it's right before Cyberpunk.
Oh, okay.
Oh man.
So you'll have
great.
a busy couple weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very busy.
Yeah, there's a lot of games coming out early next year, actually.
Yeah. Brief honorable mention to Doom Eternal as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super up for that.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I don't know, for some reason my excitement for it waned a little bit after the announcement of the delay. I don't know why. But I'm still looking forward to it. Yeah, and I figured we'd take a couple minutes here to talk about what's been announced and what we know about the new consoles, because the new PlayStation and Xbox consoles will be coming out next year in the fall or holiday, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I mean, so at this point, I think a little bit more is known about the new Xbox, the Series X, as they're calling it. That they kind of unveiled it at the Game Awards. And, hardware, really specific hardware specifications aren't out there, but I'm kind of more interested in talking about the games that have been announced for it. Like, I'm interested in what they're going to do with Halo Infinite, how they're going to go back to Halo, because while the last 2 games were okay, they weren't great. They weren't like that they were just good enough. So I hope that they've spent their time and made something really special for the launch of the. It has to be right. They have to be somewhat confident in it that they're gonna go back and say, hey, we're launching a console with Halo. Well, last time they did that was the original Xbox. And the video, the trailer they showed of Hellblade looked really great. And I'm excited to see where that story is going. Tech wise, the graphics and everything looked great. I don't know if that's actual real gameplay or if it's just pre-rendered stuff. It was just a trailer. They didn't really get into details about that, but even if it is just like pre-rendered, that's still kind of crazy for graphics technology. So yeah, that's kind of like where I am with the new consoles. PlayStation 5, they really haven't been out there saying like what their launch lineup is going to be at all. They really haven't unveiled the console itself. We've only seen the dev kits. I mean, we know that. I think we know that in terms of power, I think these consoles are going to be even closer in terms of how powerful they are compared to last generation. I think they're all going to have like the same features, like these fast SSDs and ray tracing and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's going to come down a lot to what kind of services are offered on them.
I know one thing I just was reading as far as PlayStation side, since there hasn't been as much, the developers were talking about the Navi kit and that chipset. They've actually, for the big, because, backwards compatibility is also going to be a big thing with these systems.
Yep.
The PlayStation 5 is going to have dedicated profiles built into the chip for the backwards compatibility. So it's not you're trying to run these games on this new hardware. It's the hardware going into a different mode that matches the hardware that those games were made on.
Okay.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how that works out.
That sounds like the way that Xbox is doing their backwards compatibility right now, where it's actually like an emulator, like an Xbox 360 emulator or an original Xbox emulator, and that's why you have to download the games. It won't just play off the discs because downloading a special version of the emulator that runs the game the best, which is why they can, get Red Dead Redemption running at 4K,
right,
and stuff like that. So yeah, that makes sense they'd be going down that road.
Yeah, so I think that'll kind of be interesting. But like I said, we haven't really seen. There hasn't been a ton of solid information on both. We know what these kits kind of have in them, and what they might be capable of, but how they get fine-tuned into what defines an Xbox and what defines the PlayStation. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Lee? What are you looking forward to with these new machines?
Mostly the games. Tech is kind of, unless it's a real dog of a console, tech is going to be what tech is. The minutiae of what one's better than the other is going to be kind of not far off. I want to see what Microsoft do with the new studios.
Yeah.
I want to see what they do with Obsidian off the ground, and I could see them putting Obsidian on something like Fable, for instance.
Yeah.
I want to see what they do with it. I want to see what PlayStation do with PS Now. I feel like they're testing the waters with PS Now, starting to kind of have staggered releases of their exclusives. Kind of a little bit later, maybe a couple of years later. I'm wondering if they're testing the waters to basically jump in and then do the day and date thing. Because obviously it's been successful with Microsoft.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what PlayStation's response is to Game Pass.
Which I think would probably be the same sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. It's gonna come down to like what where do you want to spend your $15 a month subscription? More than like, I'm getting this because I want to buy, specifically the next God of War. It's like you're gonna get the next God of War if you get the next PlayStation, because you're gonna pay for the whatever service they have, because you're gonna get everything.
Yeah. And whether they move that, of course, across to PC, because there's stuff like Detroit, which was never.
Right,
it's been so many years after the fact that I just feel like that's a rollout, trying to kind of get you used to the idea that maybe it's going to be available on PC too.
Yeah,
it just feels like maybe a step, because maybe Microsoft jumped in a bit too quickly with that, and they just went all in all at once. And everybody went, well, what's the point? I think maybe the best thing to do was maybe stagger that and like test the idea out.
Yeah,
So
usually it goes the other way.
it.
Usually it's Microsoft's the one that kind of hangs back and lets the others test the water, but they kind of went the other way with this one. But that was most probably because they were, they were, the underdog this year, so they had to make their make it known that they weren't just going to roll over.
Yeah, they kind of fucked it going in, didn't they, with the DRM and all that?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They did speaking of redemption stories, they did a pretty good job turning it around, but they're gonna have to come out starting fresh here in a big way.
Yeah. I think Spencer's steering it right. So
yep.
It remains to be seen how Ryan handles PlayStation though, because he's quite a divisive figure. He's not he's not quite as warm and fuzzy, if you can believe I'm saying warm and fuzzy about Sean Layden.
Yeah, right.
Carl Self. But he's not the figure that he was.
No.
That way. He's quite notorious over here.
Yeah, I hope they find somebody.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that is kind of something you need right now. With your Phil Spencer's, and your Nintendo has it tied up with they have a few people that they put out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because he's from PlayStation Europe, Jim Ryan, and knowing what he's said over time and how he views the gaming industry. Yeah. I'm not sure, if you like your single player narratives only. Sorry. Do you know what I mean? That might change a little bit. It might not be.
Yeah, or your backwards compatibility.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He doesn't hold any. I'm surprised they're going this far with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I'm sure he'll probably come out and he'll reverse his position on all of that stuff, because he has to.
Yeah. We'll see. It's interesting. It's going to be a more interesting generation than this one, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Because the stakes have changed.
In terms of games, anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like this generation overall was kind of okay on games. Wasn't like it was a lot of iteration, rather than completely new, fresh ideas.
Yeah. Well, the PS3, 360, Wii generation was kind of level pegging, neck and neck, and the dynamic changed with all of them this time around. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more stakes going into this next one, so it's going to be a bit more fun to watch play out.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's going to be all sorts of different new tech too, so we'll see how that susses out. All right, I guess that's going to wrap it up. We talked a lot about video games we played this year. We talked a lot about video games we've played over the last 10 years. And we talked a little bit about games we're going to be playing in the future. And yeah, overall it was pretty good year and decade for games. And I think we all came out on the other end better people, honestly.
Aside from you being broken by the Quiet Man.
Right, and you Derek being broken by Left Alive, and Lee being broken by the Pandas.
Why? It's unnecessary. This has got to stop now.
Does it?
Let it go.
New decade, new animal. I'll let you choose.
New bamboo.
Yep. Yeah, new you, new bamboo.
There you go.
That's good.
Call it
one.
that.
All right, that's gonna wrap us up for our Game of the Year 2019, whatever you want to call it. We'll be back next year with something, some of the same stuff, maybe some new stuff. We'll see. But yeah, stay tuned, and thanks guys for hanging out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you next year. Thank you for joining us on this very special episode of Voxel Viewpoint. If you'd like to hear or see more, please consider subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app, subscribing to us on YouTube, or visiting voxelvoice.com, where all of our great content comes together in one place. Also check out the Voxel Voice Facebook group, where you can join in on the discussion with a great, like-minded community.